Everybody, it's Brooke with the Buttered Home and welcome to my messy kitchen. I am real excited to be with y'all tonight. Tonight we are going to together make our very own sourdough starter. Now, before I start, just a couple of housekeeping notes. I am not a sourdough expert. I have some really good food blogging friends that are, and I happen to have a daughter who is. Tanner, my oldest, has been doing sourdough for 4 years now, and it's thanks to her that I didn't give up totally on this. Over the last 9-10 days, I've bothered her a lot, so she gets all the credit for this. And she gave me some really good tips, and these are some of the tips that I'm going to pass on to you. Sourdough starter can be intimidating. It is a commitment. I saw down one of the dozens of rabbit holes that I went down, I saw where one blogger, and I think it was the Pantry Mama, said, no, it was the Clever Carrot that said, it's an understanding. So it's not something we do, it is a partnership between you and the starter, because the starter is alive, and that is why most people name their starters. And I have named mine, and her name is Phyllis, and she is beautiful, and she smells wonderful, and she bakes just absolutely delicious bread. Okay, so I've made my first loaf tonight, and then I made these beautiful dinner rolls this morning with Phyllis. So she and I have a very good understanding, but I'm new to this, so I'm just kind of dabbling in it right now. So we are going to do this for the duration. Now, I had said in my email to my followers that we were going to do this at 8 p.m. every night, and I think that's probably a little late. So I'll send out an email reminder tomorrow with a recap of this, and so if you miss it, don't worry about it. You'll get a replay as long as you're on the email list tomorrow. That we're going to probably bump it back to 7 p.m. And there's one night, if we go 10 days, there's one night that I might have to bump it back even to 6. But I'll just make sure you have it set to favorites so that you'll see that announcement and that you won't miss it. Big D is here monitoring comments and will stop me if we have some questions. But if you come in late, we are mixing sourdough starters. So if you're wondering what we're doing, just look at the description up there, and that kind of tells you where we're going with it. So day one, it's easy. Day one is mix. It's not discard and mix, it's mix. So we're going to do that now. Now I have 2 jars in front of me, and I am going, and the reason why is I'm doing a little test. So I have some whole wheat flour. Now, a lot of the literature that you'll see online will tell you to start your starter with a whole grain flour like whole wheat or even rye. And that's a good idea because they are so full of protein. So, but now I have seen other people say that it is okay to do this with just unbleached flour. Well, when I started Phyllis, I started her with whole wheat flour, and she's turned out beautifully. So this is a test for me to make sure, you know, that we're kind of consistent. Now, you'll notice I'm not weighing what I'm putting in. And the reason why I'm not is because really, number one, there's just no need, okay? When you start baking, that it's imperative that you have a food scale, because 150 grams of flour is a lot different than 150 grams of water. Water, by weight, is heavier than flour. So that matters whenever you're baking. Like a lot of my recipes, I'm going to want you to get a feel for how your starter should smell, look, and feel when you mix it. So you hear I have my tap running back here, and I'm just heating up, just getting a little warm water. Not hot, not cold. It's what my grandmama and my mama would call tepid. So it's a little warmer than like room temperature. I don't ask me what the temperature is. I could get out my thermometer. But so what we're looking for here when we mix it is almost like cake batter. So what we do is we're going to add a little water at a time to get that consistency. And the reason why I'm not giving you measurements here is because where you live and the temperature of your house and your climate may be a lot different than mine, okay? So we add the water, and I did about a half a cup of flour, just so you'll know. I put my flour in first, and then I add my water. Now it's a little thicker than I want it. See, I've got some dry spots, and I hope you can see it all right. So we're going to add a little more water just to get it to that thick cake batter consistency. And I'll get a spoon and grab it and show it to you. But I'm going to wipe off my spatula. And I find having a good firm spatula to mix this with makes all the difference in the world. All right, so let me get a little bit out. And you can see it's sticky, it's spongy, it's gloppy. See that? That's the consistency that you're going for. It's wet, but it's not super wet. Okay, so now we've done that with our unbleached, plain, all-purpose flour. Now we're going to do the same thing with our whole wheat flour. Now I'm going to add that water just a little bit at a time. And also, whatever type flour you're using also might dictate how much water you use. So, like making biscuits, a coworker and I were talking about this today. I give you a loose biscuit recipe that says we use 2 cups of self-rising flour and 1 cup of buttermilk, right? You might need more, you might need less. So that's why I'm not giving you measurements on this, because the amount of water you need will depend on the type of flour you're using, as well as your climate and the temperature in your home. That's why it's best to learn how to do this by look and by feel. As long as you get your consistency correct, then you're good to go. Now I'm using really wide jars for this so that hopefully it's a little easier for you to see. But typically I do this in a large, wide mouth mason jar. So this guy got a few dry spots and it's pretty thick. So I'm gonna add another splash of flour. Now this whole wheat, or if you use a rye flour, we don't feed the entire time with it. You can, but you're gonna have a really rich and a really dark sourdough starter if you do that. Most people, when they feed, or when they start the starter rather, they start with the whole wheat because of the amount of protein in it. All right, you see that? Real thick, gloppy cake batter. It tends to stay together, but it will separate. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna check that jar and make sure that we scrape down those sides. And you can do this in a mason jar too, and get it nice and clean. Now a lot of people will take a rubber band and will mark so that they can watch it, but guys, we're not gonna have to worry about it rising for a few days. We just wanna make sure that it's gonna be active. And there are going to be a few different ways that we'll be able to tell that. So let me wipe off my spatula because I'm trying not to mix my flours. And we'll make sure there's no dry spots. And we'll use that spatula just to clean off the sides of that starter. So just to recap, we added just a small amount of flour because you can make starter and you can keep starter alive with small amounts. Once you establish your starter, there's no real need to keep a lot unless you're going to bulk bake bread. And you can bulk your starter up with just a tiny amount just by feeding it. Feed it the amount of flour that it's going to need for you to produce the amount of starter that you need to make your bread. Now, so you can put your lid on these, and I put these up. I should have left them out, and I can't find them. So that's going to be our one big mishap of the night, but just finger tight. So if you know what finger tight is, that's when you get it in the threads and you give it probably a half a turn and it's still kind of loose. Then you want to just kind of store it away. Now I have found over the course of the last 10 days that mine tend to do better with like a whole flour sack towel or some cheesecloth. So we're going to cover these with cheesecloth, and I don't have any rubber bands, so we're using cooking twine. And I'm just going to secure those around the top with the cooking twine and just tie it in a single knot so that we can easily get it off. And look, I'm having all kind of trouble. Only when I'm live, right? I did this earlier on another one and I didn't have not a single bit of trouble. Have any questions, Danny?
No.
All right. Y'all feel free to ask questions, but this is perfectly fine. So now we're going to store this in a warm spot. So this is where you know your kitchen or your house better than anybody else, right? So I've been doing mine out here. This was kind of our maiden voyage in the new studio. I wanted to make sourdough starter here, and this is where Phyllis was born. So this experiment is also going to stay here too. And I have, at the beginning, stored mine on the top of the refrigerator. But I have found about halfway through that storing them on my top shelf here, they do really well. And this is Phyllis. I'm just going to show you Phyllis. I fed Phyllis earlier tonight and she was about right here, and she's already doubled in bulk. Half of her is going to a good friend of mine at work tomorrow. I'm really excited to share part of Phyllis with her. I shared another half with another friend today. So we're going to just cover this.
Can you use potato flakes?
This is a different type of flour. Sourdough, what you're thinking of is like an Amish type share starter. I know that there are some versions that use potato flakes, but like I said in the beginning, I'm new to this, and this is the only rabbit hole that I have gone down. But I think there's a different type altogether of sourdough or bread starter period that uses potato flakes. It would be worth researching, but I think those types are used, or they were in the 90s, for those sweet Amish breads, I think, that were more like for desserts and things like that. They were fantastic, and I missed that. I did that for a long time. But I know that there may be a version of regular sourdough that uses potato flakes, but I'm not aware of it. So I'll see if I can do some research and have some more information on that for you tomorrow night. So this is our whole wheat starter, and we're going to do the same thing with it.
Do you ever need to use yeast?
Yes, sometimes whenever, not when you're making the starter, but in some of the discard quick bread recipes, you can use yeast. It just depends on what you're cooking and what recipe you're using. I'm pretty sure that there are some dinner roll recipes that you can actually add yeast to that don't have what they call a long bulk ferment time, where you let the dough rest and ferment for 8 to 12 hours. So you can use yeast. It's just going to be recipe specific. But as far as what we're doing making the starter, this is a true fermented wild yeast that we're making. So we're using 2 ingredients, which is warm water and a good high protein flour to allow it to ferment on its own and take the wild yeast from the air, because you have it in your home, you have it where you work, you have it in your yard, it's in the air. You can't see it, but it exists. And it encapsulates it here, and it turns this into a leavening agent. So this is going to be your cheapest, most cost-effective, and this is one of the oldest leavening agents that has ever been around. And I've seen a lot of talk about people who say they have a 100-year-old starter, or a starter that came over with their family for Italy. And I'll be truthful with you, it's different. It may have some components of that has been handed down for generations, but if I give you half of my starter, when you take it home and you use it and you feed it, it's not going to be Phyllis anymore. It's going to be whatever your starter is, because it takes on the characteristics of the wild yeast that is native to your home. That's one of the most beautiful things about sourdough, is that just about everybody's tastes different. It looks different. The texture is different because they are native to the home in which they were grown. And I think that's fascinating. And that's why there's so much science behind it. And so many people have taken this and they have developed a very specific science. And it's a great and wonderful thing to learn all about the ins and outs. But there is no replacement for just learning the simple, basic feel for how to make your starter. And that's what we're going to do, hopefully over the next 7 to 10 days. Got a question?
How long will it keep if you're not using it?
That's a very good question. So once we get these guys ready to cook with, then that is also going to be specific to you. You will then need to decide how often you want to cook with it, and that will determine how you store it. So, for instance, for me, I'm only probably going to cook mine about once a week. So what I'll do is I will store it in the refrigerator. This is after it's well established, guys, not during this 7 to 10 days that we're building the starter. But once it's well established and ready to cook with, I will store mine in the refrigerator, and on Friday morning before I leave for work, I'll take her out of the refrigerator and I'll feed her and I'll leave her on the counter. And then she can come to room temperature. All that wild yeast and fermentation that's in there that the refrigerator has just kind of put to sleep will wake back up, and she'll consume that new flour that we fed her with, and she will reactivate and bubble and double in size, and I'll be able to bulk proof bread with her Friday night or Saturday morning. So there is no right or wrong way. If you're going to cook more than once a week, you can totally leave it in the warm spot. You'll just need to feed it every day or every other day as needed. If you keep it in the refrigerator and you've got to go on vacation, if you only feed it twice a month, you're not going to kill it. Most people think that when they store it in the refrigerator and it develops that liquid on the top that can be brown and smell kind of alcohol-y, that they've killed it. Me being one of them. This is one of the things that happened to mine that Tanner gave to me in 2021. I thought I had killed it, so I threw it out. It's just asleep, and when it's asleep, it's not eating, so it creates a liquid that's called hooch. And that's just part of the fermentation process. We're gonna have some hooch within the next 7 to 10 days as we do this. And all you do is just pour it off and refeed it, let it come to room temperature. You can do this once every other week, once a week, whatever your schedule will allow. Now, over the next 7 to 10 days, starting tomorrow night, whenever we meet at 7 and not 8, I'll send a reminder tomorrow, we're not only going to feed it again and do the very same thing that we just did, but we're going to discard, which means whatever this has turned into tomorrow night at 7, we're going to throw out half of it. Now, I know that that seems wasteful, but it's not. We've just invested pennies on the dollar in creating something that can be handed down for generations and preserved. If you get tired of doing this, there is an easy way that you can dry your starter and keep it and then rehydrate it later. But we'll talk about that as we near the end. Right now, we're just concerned with bringing it to life. So tomorrow night, we're gonna throw half of it out, and no, you won't wanna use it because we gotta go through a stinky stage. We gotta go through an alkaline smelling stage. We've got to go through a stage where it's produced a really brown hooch on top that smells a little bit like sweaty feet or lots of other bad smells. But those all are the stages in normal fermentation that we have to go through to get to this beautiful. And Danny, will you go overhead so maybe we can see this beautiful bubbly starter? And you see how lumpy and bubbly it looks? And Danny, you can go back to the front. I'll try to. We have bubbles throughout. The smell smells like yeast rolls. It smells very, very good, and it's pleasant and it's easy, and I'll show you what the texture looks like. The texture is frothy and stretchy and gorgeous, and this only took me 9 days. So if I can do this, anybody can. Do I have a question?
No.
Okay. So this is what we're going to get to, and I'm really excited to be doing this. Like I said at the beginning, this is all new to me, so I'm kind of passing on what I've learned over the last 9 days. In the beginning, I started weighing all of my flour and my water out, and it never looked right. And it's because I live in the South where it's summer 80% of the year, and we were having some high humidity, so that flour just absorbed every bit of that water that I put in there, and it was not enough. So about day 4 or 5, I started, okay, I'm just gonna do this by look and feel. I talked to Tanner, she's my sourdough expert, and she said, Mom, you just have to get a feel for it. Just trust your instinct. And so that's what I did. And then, well, let me back up. So day 3 or day 4, it stunk. I thought I was done for. She told me to be patient. Then it just seemed really dry, like it wasn't wet enough. And she told me to trust my instincts and talked about that cake batter consistency. And so the next day I started just kind of doing what we did tonight and just kind of throwing things in there until it felt right, until it looked right. And then day 5, 6, 7, and 8, it was just kind of, it just kind of sat there. It didn't really look different. It didn't bubble. It just sat there. It didn't have any hooch. It grew a little, didn't have any bubbles, and I thought, now it's day 7. I should be having something here. And that just wasn't the case. So I got up on day 9, which was Monday morning, and I came in here, and this was waiting for me, and I squealed. So it may take you less time than me. It may take you more time than me, but we're going to invest in however long it takes these starters to do it. And by the time that we're done, if you have to keep going, you'll have all the tools that you need to continue to feed. Every night, we're going to talk a little bit about how to sustain it, keep it alive after you cook with it, how to make more, how to keep less, and some helpful things to do with it if you don't want to cook with it. And I'll just give you a little sneak peek on that before we go. It's not wasteful if you can't cook with your discard or if you can't give it away to do other things with it. It's also not wasteful if you throw it in the trash, okay? One thing you don't want to do is flush it down your sink drain or your toilet. So I would suggest that you do some of these other means. You can dilute it and you can use it as fertilizer for houseplants and in your garden. They love it. So that's just one option, and I know lots of people who could use it. You can also store the discard until you have large amounts so that you can bake 5 different types of cookies or 5 different types of banana bread. It will keep in the refrigerator for a good little while as long as you're adding to it. So you don't always have to cook with it right away, and you don't always have to throw it out. There's all kind of other things that we're going to talk about. But once you make it, and if you realistically commit to a once a week cook, there's no need to have a ton to throw out because we can keep it in the fridge. So I'm really excited that you've been with us tonight. I hope that you'll be with us for the duration. We're gonna share this video so that it stays on our timeline. Hopefully I'll be able to download it and upload it to YouTube since I could not get my live stream to work on YouTube tonight. I made no promises. So I can at least upload it there, and then I'll send a link in my reminder email tomorrow. So if you've been with me tonight and you have mixed up your sourdough starter along with me, I would love it if you'd snap a picture and come back to this post and share it in the comment thread so that we can watch your starter together. Also, if you have any other questions about making your own sourdough starter, feel free to ask them. We would love for you to share this video. We would like to see our viewership every night grow as we do this, just like our starter. So I can't wait to see y'all tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central, right here in the Messy Kitchen. And as always, from me and Big D, because we're all this here right now at the Buttered Home, we sure love y'all. Bye.